everyone. Welcome to day 6 of Mrs. Lamprin's reading group. Today we're going to be going over independent and dependent clauses. So with that said, let's go ahead and begin. All right, so the first thing is clauses. Clauses, they are groups of words that contain a subject and a predicate. Independent clauses. So remember we said independent clauses are like adults. They can go out by themselves anytime they like. Independent clauses are also known as main clauses because they are the main idea of what you're talking about, okay? Independent clauses are connected by coordinating conjunctions to create compound sentences, okay? So we went over last week the coordinating conjunctions, which was fanboys, okay? So if you have those, then those create two independent sentences to make a compound sentence. So here we go. We have for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So when those are connected, normally it creates an independent clause, okay? And two independent clauses create a compound sentence, and those are coordinating conjunctions. All right, that's a review from last week. Make sure that you know that those are coordinating conjunctions. Okay, so here's some examples of some independent clauses. The elephant trumpeted. So that's an independent clause. You have a subject, which was the elephant. What did the elephant do? It trumpeted. That's your predicate. The elephant trumpeted. The elephant trumpeted, but the giraffe remained silent. Okay, so let's look at this. We have a but there, okay? What is that? What kind of conjunction is that? It's a coordinating conjunction. So let's see if we have two independent clauses. We have the elephant trumpeted. Well, does it have a subject and a predicate? So the elephant is the subject. What did the elephant do? It trumpeted, so that's independent. So the elephant trumpeted is independent clause. Let's look at the second part. The giraffe remained silent. So we have another subject, which was the giraffe. What did the giraffe do? It remained silent. So we have a predicate. So that also is independent. So if we have an independent clause plus an independent clause, it means we have a compound sentence. Okay? Now, dependent clauses are like children. They can't go anywhere unless an adult, the independent clause, goes with them. It gives more information about that independent clause, is usually introduced by a subordinating conjunction. That's really important, a subordinating conjunction. Okay, we're going to go over that. Sometimes the dependent clause is called the subordinating clause. So here are a list of the subordinating conjunctions. We have after, before, though, since, until, while, whenever, than, because, when, although, unless, as, where, and if. So if any of those is at the beginning of the dependent clause, you know that that part of your sentence is the dependent clause, right? Because it cannot stand alone. All right. So here's our note so far. The independent clause, the part of the sentence separated with a comma that makes a complete sentence of its own. If I am late to school again, I will have to go to detention. So what is the independent clause in the example? So if I'm late to school again, what happens? I will have to go to detention. If I were to just say, if I'm late for school again, that doesn't make any sense. Well, if I'm late to school again, what? I could just say, I will have to go to detention. Well, we know that that's a complete sentence. I will have to do what? I will have to go to detention. So that's an independent clause. The dependent clause is part of the sentence separated with a comma that contains a subject and a predicate, but does not make a complete sentence of its own. Okay? So in our example before, if I am late for school again, I will have to go to detention. So the dependent clauses, we first look for the subordinating conjunction. Okay, so if was one of our subordinating conjunctions. So does it begin the dependent clause? Yes. So right there we know that this one is the dependent clause. Okay. If we forget about the subordinating conjunctions, we're going to look for which part of the sentence cannot stand alone. I can't say out loud, if I'm late for school again. Well, okay, what does that mean? Okay, that's my dependent clause. I need to add on. All right, take out your notes. Okay, yours will look a little different than mine. it should have these same sentences on it, but it should also have, I'm gonna try to move this. I don't think I can. All right, I can't move that. It's gonna have these sentences. One sentence will be bold and one will not be. But we're gonna identify what the independent clause is and what the dependent clause is. Okay, so take that out. What I want you to do is put an I on the parts of them that are independent and the parts that are dependent. Okay, so you don't need to write out the full word, just I for independent and D for dependent. Right? So before we begin, I am putting on Google Classroom that list of subordinating conjunctions for you. So you can either print that off or write them down so you have them for the next few activities. All right, here we go. Here are your subordinating conjunctions. Again, those were in the presentation, so that's what's going to be on Google Classroom. The first sentence says, I am not doing the dishes tonight unless someone helps me. So of those two sentences, we need to first look for the subordinating conjunction. I'm not doing the dishes tonight unless someone helps me. So the subordinating conjunction is unless. So that tells us that this part of the sentence is the dependent clause. So go ahead and put a D on that line so you know when you look back. That's a dependent clause. It's introduced by the subordinating conjunction unless, which then means that the beginning part of the sentence is the independent clause. I am not doing the dishes tonight. So if I was to say those sentences independently, you can automatically tell which one is the dependent clause. So if I say, unless someone helps me, well, what does that mean? Unless someone helps me what? Okay? But if I do say, I am not doing the dishes tonight, then that's its own thought. That's a complete sentence. Okay? Next sentence we have, because Matthew was talking to a girl, he was late for choir. So I already hit the button on accident. So because is our subordinating conjunction, which means that the first part of the sentence is going to be the dependent clause. Because he was talking to the girl, what happened? So that's dependent. Matthew was late for choir is the independent clause. So go ahead and put a D under because he was talking to a girl and put an I under Matthew was late for choir. Okay, the next sentence says, I ran drills at football practice until I could barely stand anymore. So again, we're going to look for our subordinating conjunction from that list above. Okay, so the subordinating conjunction is until, which means that until that part of the sentence, until I could barely stand anymore, is our dependent clause. And I ran drills at football practice is our independent clause. So go ahead and put a D under until I could barely stand anymore and put an I under I ran drills at football practice. Okay, next sentence. After the curtains opened, Elsa stood mesmerized on the stage. So again, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look for the subordinating conjunction. For this one, it's after. So that means after the curtain opens is our dependent clause. So go ahead and put a D under that one, which means Elsa stood mesmerized on the stage is an independent clause. Go ahead and put an I underneath that one. Okay, here's our last two sentences. You may play outside if a friend comes over. So again, we're going to look for the subordinating conjunction in these. If. So if is a subordinating conjunction, so that means that if a friend comes over is a dependent clause. So go ahead and put a D under that one. You may play outside is the independent clause. Very good. All right, last one. When Julia calls you, you need to go back to the store. So again, first thing we do is we look for the subordinating conjunction. So in this sentence, it'll be when. When Julia calls is the dependent clause. You need to go back to the store is the independent clause. Fabulous. Okay, so if you have any questions on this, make sure that you're coming back to check in with me. Leave me a comment on the Google Classroom assignment, and I can make sure to set something up with you. And again, check out that resource of the subordinating conjunctions. All right, well, I hope that you're all doing well. I miss you. I'll talk to you soon.